There are places where nothing happens, and yet sometimes you feel that something is not quite right. You tell yourself it's just the wind, it's just animals, it's just an impression, and most of the time you're probably right. But today I want to look at this from a different angle, because even when rational explanations are applied, some things can't be fully explained. And this is where Odiham Castle comes in. People describe this as a presence, and Odiham Castle has that reputation. I have chosen Odiham Castle for a reason. This isn't just a place that feels uneasy, but a place where people have consistently reported experiencing things over time. And this is what I want to look into, and how this fits with the historical background and the legends around this place. Before we go anywhere near stories and ghosts, there is something we need to understand. That sometimes it doesn't start with that. It starts with your body. Your brain's primary job isn't logic and isn't creativity. It's prediction. Every second, it takes in sound, space, movement, and light. And it tries to work out what happens next. This is a system that is designed to keep you and me alive. When the information is incomplete or ambiguous, the brain seems to adjust to how it responds. In places like this, where sight lines are limited, sound behaves oddly, and the environment is unfamiliar, your senses don't always give you enough to work with. The brain seems to fall back onto something older, something more cautious. The amygdala, the part of the brain involved in threat detection, is often described as working on a simple principle. When in doubt, assume danger. Now, from an evolutionary point of view, it totally makes sense. It is safer to imagine a threat than to miss one. So the brain starts filling in the blanks. We haven't seen anything, but yet the body responds. This reaction isn't just psychological. The environment itself can play an important role in how we experience a place. One factor that is often mentioned is infrasound. Sound usually below 20 hertz, beneath the range of human hearing. You cannot consciously hear it, but the body can still respond to it. In the late 1990s, Vic Tandy investigated a laboratory where staff believed the building was haunted. People at the time reported sense of dread, cold sweats, and even a glimpse of shadowy figures, which are usually really common. One day, Tandy was working in the lab, and he felt that he was not quite alone. At some point, he noticed a grey shape in his peripheral vision coming towards him. When he turned towards it, it disappeared. Eventually, he traced the source to an extractor fan that was producing infrasounds, which caused all the spooky action. Once the fan was adjusted, the hauntings stopped. And then there's the part that most people tend to struggle with, and that is the feeling that there's someone there. You sense a presence, even when you know you're alone. Neuroscience often refers to this as sensed presence. It has been experienced by mountaineers, sailors, people in isolation, and people under severe stress and exhaustion. In 2006, neurologist Olaf Blank demonstrated that disrupting a specific part of the brain, the temporoparietal junction, could reliably produce the sensation of a shadow figure nearby. The brain can temporarily misidentify its own body and projects itself very briefly, into the surrounding environment. It's quite bonkers. But what we bring into a place matters. What we expect to encounter shapes how we interpret what we sense. If you enter a place already believing it's haunted. The brain is more likely to interpret ambiguity as threat. Now, up to this point, everything has an explanation. But you knew this was coming? What about a place where people feel uneasy? A place where an explanation does not end the experience. Odiham Castle was built in the 13th century during the reign of King John. That would be the King John from the Robin Hood stories. The ruler, remembered for heavy taxation, harsh rule, and widespread resentment. And Odiham Castle was part of the system. It wasn't a home, it was a royal stronghold designed to manage territory, movement, and authority. During the reign of Henry III, Odiham passed into the hands of the Montfort family. Under Simon de Montfort, the castle began to function more like a household than a fortress. And when de Montfort fell from power, the castle returned to the crown. In the 14th century, under Edward III, Odiham Castle was converted into a hunting lodge. It wasn't private or informal. It was guarded and controlled. And at times it was used to hold high-status prisoners, for example, David II of Scotland, who was kept captive here after being captured in battle. It was a comfortable stay by medieval standards, but 3 years in captivity, they would test anybody. Places of imprisonment carry a different atmosphere, I think. The vigilance, fear and resentment by those who were imprisoned here and worked here don't simply disappear. And I think that they linger, even if the place was abandoned afterwards. Odiham Castle has been for a long time described as haunted. The reports are dramatically consistent. For example, people describing seeing a male figure, often interpreted as a guard or soldier. Others report footsteps or movement when no one is present, or sounds that do not really belong here. Less commonly, there are reports of a female presence, usually described as sad. And I do wonder whether it was Eleanor or Philippa. I mean, they would have left the castle at some point, and maybe they were set to go. What is interesting is how the reports change over time. In earlier accounts, experiences were vague, just movements and sounds without a clear source. In more recent tellings, extra details sometimes appear, something like music, a lone figure. When these often romanticized additions are stripped away, what remains is actually more consistent. People aren't describing scenes or performances. They're describing presence, movement, and sound. That doesn't quite make sense. And that quiet consistency is actually quite more revealing than every single little detail. Some of this can be explained. Acoustics, expectations, the way old structures behave. But when similar experiences are reported again and again over time, the picture becomes a little bit more complicated. You do not jump straight into ghosts, but you do not dismiss them outright. I didn't come here expecting an experience. No ghosts, no signs, just the place itself. And what I found instead was small things. For example, just a quiet sense of sadness. And as we've seen, this could be explained in a lot of ways. I found flowers carefully placed inside a padlock hole. A cluster of rocks that looked like an evil eye. Oh gosh, look at this.
What is it doing? What are you doing?
Oh my gosh, it started with the haunting thing. Oh, look at this. This thing's got a life of its own, isn't it? At some point, my Insta360 simply stopped working. It was meant to be filming, it wasn't. There was no warning, no shutdown, just nothing was recorded, which was a little odd. I've been filming and he hasn't filmed it. And look. He's not connecting. Come on. And here, just next to the wall, I noticed rocks and wood, as if someone has set that up for a fire. Looks like someone has been making a fire here. None of this proves anything, and I am not claiming it means something supernatural happened, but it does show how easily a place like this invites meaning. Not everything that cannot be explained is supernatural, but then again, some experiences do resist explanation. This is a different kind of video. It is partly inspired by Charles Dickens, who was fascinated by ghosts, but deeply skeptical of how easily we jump to conclusions. Well, I can't blame him for this one. It's clearly gotten into my head.